Hey everyone, it's Pure Insanity, and I've got a really fun video for you here on the uber unique Ahavarion Spear of Lycander. I'm going to cover my overall thoughts on the uber unique, what builds this uber unique can shrine in, and my Druid Tramplestorm build I created around it. First and foremost, this uber unique is a ton of fun. Killing an elite feels like opening a Christmas present. You never know what shrine buff you're going to get. Of course, sometimes the buff is that big shiny toy that you've always wanted, and sometimes it's socks. It depends on the context. For example, if you're in a high level nightmare dungeon and you pop the greed shrine buff, it's a letdown. However, if you're farming and you pop the greed shrine buff, it's both literal and figurative gold. No matter the shrine buffs you get, the stats are amazing, and it can add a ton of damage to many builds. 52.5% CC damage, 52.5% base damage, 30% attack speed, and an amazing 24% crit strike chance, and those are all huge stats to many builds. The stun lucky hit chance is at 42%, allowing it to proc very frequently for many builds too. That said, it is giving up either two aspects or another unique weapon, so the stats really need to fit well into the build without those potential aspects or other unique weapons. Shrine buffs are incredibly powerful besides the greed buff, but to kill elites, to get that buff, the build needs to be strong enough with that sacrifice. Consequently, I do think it's generally best suited for Helltides, Blood Harvest, and low-level Nightmare Dungeon speed farming where killing elites is easy. Taking both the stats and name into account, I can only presume this uber unique was designed for druids, more specifically werewolf builds. Except the big challenge using this uber unique in stormwolf builds is they typically depend on critical aspects or the great staff of Crone, making this uber unique more of a novelty item. As a druid main and build crafter, I eagerly accepted the challenge and came up with my new Tramplestorm build. But for the general audience and those wanting to build craft with this uber unique, I'll step through my thoughts about how to use this uber unique powerfully and not just for fun. The easiest give here is the attack speed aspects. Giving up the rapid or accelerating aspect is a no-brainer because the 30% attack speed bonus is general attack speed and doesn't require to be procced. The damage bonuses are top-notch, but it's not necessarily any better than top damage affixes for any given build. Therefore, you'll want to synergize with the crit strike chance and stun lucky hit. Since crit strike chance comes with an inherent 50% X damage multiplier, it can be as effective, if not more, than many other damage aspects. As many builds utilize aspects in both these regards, it's the next second aspect swap. So if you have a build using aspects in two of these three areas, swap them out and give it a shot. As mentioned, it's just a ton of fun, alleviates some of the mundane nature of grinding, and can be a huge bonus to farming and or speed clearing. On that note, I have some big issues with my own recommendations. Uniques, let alone uber uniques, are meant to be build changing items. The community as a whole has expressed a lot of disappointment in the build potential of uniques. However, I feel the community has some responsibility in this, pigeonholing everything to meta and popular build variants. So as a build crafter, I really took this uber unique on as a challenge to come up with a new build. And I tell you what, I think the developers deserve some more credit here. The Tramplestorm build I came up with is really made possible by combining the Spear of Lycander, Hunter Zenith, and a mixture of Druid shapeshifting skills. It's not just a rehash of a Stormwolf build, and the game mechanics have a feel and cadence I do feel is unique. The build is doable without the Spear of Lycander, but the Spear of Lycander really brings it together and makes it more powerful. I have cleared tier 95 plus nightmare dungeons with this build, but the survivability, particularly from environmental hazards, makes it harder to show off the game mechanics. So for now, I'm going to stick with showcasing some high-level 80s Nightmare Dungeons. Admittedly, the first thing that popped out to me was definitely a Storm Wolf variant. One of the latest Druid glyph additions was the Electrocution glyph, which gave a massive buff to Lightning Bolts and Dancing Bolts. As Dancing Bolts are procced on crit strike, this just felt like an obvious win. The natural balance aspect adds 12% crit strike chance, but the problem is because Lightning Storm is a channeling skill, you're going to lose that bonus channeling for long periods of time. So you need some other Earth skill as a source of damage to alternate with. Using Nature's Fury along with Aspect of Trampled Earth seems like to be the no-brainer, but since Lightning Storm is channeled, it doesn't count as multiple casts to reset Trampled Earth through the symbiotic aspect. Here's where Hunter's Zenith comes into play. As long as you get a Werewolf skill kill, the next Werebear skill has no cooldown. This is what creates that unique feel of game mechanics. Channel, trample, channel. And you might be thinking at this point the Great Staff of Kron would work just fine here, but it doesn't. While Claw is both a Werewolf and Storm skill, Storm Strike remains just a Storm skill. That leads to missing out on many free triggers of Hunter Zenith because Storm Strike is getting the kills. You could use Tempest Roar to change that, but it's a bit of a waste with a focus on a basic skill-oriented build and damage. On the other hand, Lightning Storm is not only a core skill, but can be triggered by Nature's Fury when using Aspect of Trampled Earth. This makes investing into both Landslide and Lightning Storm incredibly synergetic. Additionally, when using Dancing Bolts, immobilization is rapidly spread, generating more Terra Motes. And to top it off with the Spear of Lycander, Stun generates Terra Motes as well. With Terra Motes adding a 40% X crit strike multiplier, stacking crit strike damage with a high crit strike chance is incredibly powerful. One of the other really great things about Hunter's Zenith is it has up to 4 ranks of Quickshift and 3 ranks of Heightened Senses. Since the build is using Tempest Roar, it means casting Lightning Storm and Trample back and forth. Both skills are getting Quickshift and Resonance multipliers. But wait, there's more! When Landslide triggers Lightning Bolts, it means Lightning Bolts are getting Earth, Storm, and Shapeshifting bonuses. And the cherry on top is the Shapeshifting glyph adds a 20% crit strike chance, giving both skills a 50% plus crit strike chance. Did I mention Hunter Zenith also comes with crit strike chance and shapeshifting damage? The one downside to the build is Lightning Storm and Dancing Bolts aren't very good boss killers. So if I can't grab a good shrine buff right before a boss fight, I'll typically swap out Dancing Bolts for another aspect. There are a lot of good alternative aspects for boss fights, but I've sided with Aspect of Retaliation, giving core skills a 40% X damage multiplier based on Fortification. And that's because I've stacked this build with Fortification and the bulk of damage is core skill damage. And I know some people might tune out or disregard the build because it isn't a great boss killer. But this build is phenomenal speed clearing 80s level Nightmare Dungeons, which, in my humble opinion, is the sweet spot for grinding glyphs. It does clear 95 plus Nightmare Dungeons very well, but this is a brand new build with brand new mechanics. I'm still learning. I do have some 90s Nightmare Dungeons coming up, but on that note, I've personally had a hard time controlling Trample and maintaining the proper mechanics all the time, but those are things that make the game fun. Learning new things, having new challenges, etc., etc. And I can't wait to die more to blood blisters and gouts of volcanic flame because that gives me a reason to play the game as more than just a button masher. For the Druids who want to try this build out, I will have a build link in the description, but I want to conclude the video with a general discussion on build crafting and enjoying the game. I think there is way too much focus on running the most uber OP builds and boss killers. If that's what you really enjoy, by all means. But the best build is going to be what you enjoy playing the most. If Duriel takes you 30 seconds to kill instead of 3 seconds, so what? If you can't run a tier 100 nightmare dungeon in under 10 minutes, so what? Is this game what you want to enjoy, or is this some sort of pissing contest? This Tramplestorm build is absolutely my favorite overall Druid build to date that I've played. Besides enjoying the build crafting process, there are so many tweaks that work with this build that allow me to mix things up. I'm still experimenting and playing around with it, having fun, despite the numerous hours I've spent in Season 2 on this one character. And my personal preference is to have a generally robust build. This build has max elemental resistances and 13.3k armor, so I don't need to farm herbs for incense to make higher level nightmare dungeons survivable. But make no mistake, I fully appreciate the meta and boss killer builds that make wiping bosses easy. And the most important point to this all is if the community continues to focus on the existing meta, we are all going to lose out. Not only will it inhibit discovering the next great builds, but the builds that make the game more enjoyable for many people aren't going to get any attention. If you have the Spear of Lycander or any other uber unique and you haven't used it because it isn't meta, I highly encourage you to try it out and see what you can do with it. As the South Park episode Make Love Not Warcraft puts it, once you've done everything, you can finally play the game. And on that note, I hope you enjoyed the video. Until next time.